The smell of rot and sickness hung thick in the cabin when Quinn Caldwell first heard the scream, and his feet were already moving before his mind caught up. Boots tossed aside somewhere in the desperate scramble down the mountain, because there was no time. No time at all when a woman's voice cut through the Wyoming wilderness like that. He had been tracking elk through the high country near the Montana border in the summer of 1873, living rough as he had for the past 8 years since the war ended, and civilization had proved too confining for a man who had seen what he had seen. The mountains had become his home, his sanctuary, and his prison all at once, and he had grown accustomed to the solitude, to the endless sky and the company of eagles and wolves. But that scream changed everything. He had been making his way down a rocky slope when he heard it, distant but unmistakable, and without thinking he had started running. The terrain grew rougher as he descended, his bare feet finding purchase on stone and dirt with the unconscious skill of someone who had spent years learning the language of the wilderness. His shoulder-length dark hair whipped behind him as he ran, his buckskin shirt clinging to the broad expanse of his chest and shoulders, muscles honed by years of survival working beneath the worn leather. Then he saw it, spread across the narrow canyon floor between him and the distant cabin where the scream had originated. A den of rattlesnakes, dozens of them, maybe more, their scaled bodies intertwined in the late afternoon sun, blocking the only quick path forward. The long way around would take an hour he did not have, and that scream had spoken of urgency, of terror, of need. Quinn Caldwell had faced Confederate artillery and cavalry charges, had wrestled bears and mountain lions, had survived blizzards and floods and the slow grinding weight of loneliness. But he had never claimed to be a smart man. A smart man would have gone around. A smart man would have found another way. He ran straight through. The first rattler struck his left ankle, fangs sinking deep, but he did not slow. The second caught his right calf, and the third his left foot again, and then he was in the thick of them, dozens of angry serpents coiling and striking, their rattles filling the air with a sound like death itself laughing. Pain bloomed white-hot across his legs and feet, venom pumping into his bloodstream with each bite, but he kept running, kept moving, because that scream had been the first human sound he had heard in 6 months, and something in it called to him in a way he could not name. He burst free of the den with at least 8 bites marking his legs, his vision already starting to swim, and forced himself up the final slope toward the cabin. It was a sturdy structure, well built, with a small garden plot and a chicken coop that spoke of someone trying to make a life in this harsh country. Smoke rose from the chimney despite the summer heat, and as he stumbled toward the door, his poisoned legs beginning to fail, he heard a voice inside, low and urgent, speaking words he could not make out. His feet were bleeding, torn by rocks and fangs alike, leaving dark prints in the dirt as he lurched the final few steps and raised his fist to pound on the door. But before his knuckles could connect with wood, the door swung open, and Quinn Caldwell found himself staring into the most extraordinary eyes he had ever seen. They were the color of amber, flecked with green and gold, set in a face that was all sharp angles and determined lines, framed by dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid. She was younger than he had expected, perhaps 24 or 25, with the sun-weathered complexion of someone who worked outdoors and the kind of beauty that had nothing to do with softness and everything to do with strength. She wore a simple homespun dress, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with old scars, and in her hands she held a rifle that she clearly knew how to use. "I heard you coming," she said, and her voice was like whiskey and smoke, rough and real. "The snakes, you came through the den." Quinn tried to speak, to explain, to ask what was wrong, but the venom was working fast now, turning his tongue thick and his thoughts cloudy. He swayed, his considerable bulk tilting forward, and then those amber eyes widened, and the rifle was set aside, and her hands were on him, surprisingly strong, guiding him inside before he collapsed across her threshold. "Fool man," she muttered, but there was something other than anger in her voice. "Damn fool, brave man." The cabin's interior swam in his failing vision, but he was aware of being lowered to a bed, of capable hands removing what was left of his shredded pants, of cool cloth against his burning skin. He tried to focus on her face, on those remarkable eyes, but darkness was pulling at him with insistent hands. "Stay with me," she commanded, and the authority in her voice was enough to anchor him, to keep him from sliding into the abyss. "My name is Olivia Zimmerman, and you did not run through a rattlesnake den just to die in my cabin. Do you hear me? You do not get to die here." He wanted to tell her that he had not planned on dying anywhere, that he was Quinn Caldwell and he had survived worse than snake venom, but the words would not come. Instead, he felt her hands on his legs, felt the sharp bite of a knife as she cut open the wounds, felt the pressure as she sucked at the punctures, spitting venom-laced blood onto the floor with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this before. "Why?" she asked between efforts, her voice strained. "Why did you come? Why did you run through them?" He managed one word, forced past paralyzed lips, screamed. Understanding flickered across her face, followed by something that might have been regret. "My sister," she said softly. "She was in labor. The baby was breech. I had to turn it," she screamed, "but she is all right now. They are both all right." Quinn tried to tell her that was good, that he was glad, but the darkness finally won and he fell into it like a stone into deep water. He woke to pain. Every nerve in his felt like it was on fire, burning and freezing simultaneously, and for a moment he could not remember where he was or why he hurt so badly. Then memory returned in a rush, the den, the cabin, the woman with amber eyes, Olivia Zimmerman. The cabin was dimmer now, lit by lamplight rather than sun, and he realized with a start that he had lost hours, maybe a full day. His legs were wrapped in bandages that smelled of herbs and honey, and when he tried to move them, fresh agony lanced through his body, dragging a groan from his throat. "Do not move yet," came that whiskey smoke voice, and then she was there beside the bed, pressing a cup to his lips. "Drink, it will help with the pain." The liquid was bitter and earthy, some kind of willow bark tea if he knew his remedies, and he drank it gratefully, his eyes never leaving her face. In the lamplight, she looked exhausted, dark circles under those extraordinary eyes, her braid coming loose to frame her face with escaped strands of auburn hair. "How long?" he managed to ask, his voice a croak. "A day and a half," she replied, settling into a chair beside the bed, with the weary grace of someone who had been keeping vigil for hours. "You took at least 8 bites, maybe more. I got as much venom out as I could, but there was a lot of poison in you. You should be dead." "Hard to kill," he said, attempting a smile that probably looked more like a grimace, apparently. She studied him with those penetrating eyes, taking in his broad shoulders and muscled chest, the scars that marked his torso from a dozen old battles. "Who are you? And why did you run through a rattlesnake den to reach a cabin of strangers?" "Quinn Caldwell," he said, and I heard someone scream. Could not just leave it. Something shifted in her expression, a softening he had not expected. "Most men would have. I am not most men." "No," she agreed quietly. "I am beginning to see that." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the crackling of the fire in the hearth and the distant murmur of voices from another room. Quinn realized there must be others in the cabin. The sister Olivia had mentioned, perhaps others as well. "Your sister," he said. "The baby?" "Both fine, a boy, healthy and loud." A smile touched Olivia's lips, transforming her face from merely striking to genuinely beautiful. She named him Ezra. "My brother-in-law is beside himself with joy." "Good," Quinn said, and meant it. "I am glad they are well." Olivia's smile faded, replaced by a more serious expression. "You saved them, in a way. If you had not come, if I had been trying to manage alone without knowing help was close, I might have panicked. Your arrival, even in the state you were in, gave me confidence that we were not entirely alone out here. Sometimes just knowing someone else is near can make all the difference." Quinn did not know what to say to that, so he simply nodded, the movement sending fresh waves of pain through his body. Olivia noticed immediately and rose from her chair. "Sleep," she commanded. "Your body needs rest to fight the poison. I will be here when you wake." He wanted to protest that she should rest as well, that she looked as exhausted as he felt, but his eyes were already closing, the willow bark tea pulling him back toward healing darkness. The last thing he was aware of was the gentle touch of her hand on his forehead, checking for fever, and the quiet strength in her voice as she whispered, "Sleep, Quinn Caldwell, you are safe here." When he woke again, it was to sunlight streaming through the cabin's window and the smell of something cooking, rich and savory, that made his stomach clench with sudden hunger. His legs still hurt, but it was a duller pain now, the kind that spoke of healing rather than active poison. He shifted carefully in the bed and was relieved to find that his body obeyed him, the paralysis gone. "You are awake," Olivia said from across the room, where she was stirring something in a pot over the fire. "And from the look on your faces, you are hungry. That is a good sign." "Starving," he admitted, pushing himself up to a sitting position with only moderate difficulty. The room spun briefly, then settled, and he took stock of his surroundings properly for the first time. The cabin was larger than he had initially realized, well organized and clean, with shelves of preserved foods and dried herbs lining the walls. There were 2 doors leading to what must be other rooms, both currently closed, and the main living space held the bed he occupied, a table with chairs, the fireplace, and various tools and equipment that spoke of self-sufficiency and careful planning. Olivia brought him a bowl of stew, thick with meat and vegetables, and watched as he ate with the single-minded focus of a starving man. She had changed clothes, he noticed, now wearing a different dress in a shade of deep blue that brought out the colors in her eyes, and her hair was freshly braided, though already strands were escaping to curl around her face. "Venison," she said when he paused to breathe. "I shot the deer 3 days ago. We have been eating well." "We?" he asked between bites. "Myself, my sister Marianne, and her husband Robert, and now little Ezra. They came out here 2 years ago to homestead. I joined them last spring after our parents passed." There was grief in her voice, carefully controlled. "We are making a go of it, though it is hard country." "Wyoming is always hard country," Quinn agreed, "but beautiful." "You live up in the mountains?" He nodded. "For 8 years now, since the war ended." Understanding flickered in her eyes. She did not ask which side he had fought for, which he appreciated. The war had been over for 8 years, but the wounds it left were still raw in many places, the divisions still sharp. Out here in the wilderness, such things mattered less. "A mountain man," she said thoughtfully. "I thought your kind were mostly gone, moved on, or settled down." "Most did," Quinn said. "I could not. Too many ghosts in the civilized places." Olivia nodded slowly, and he had the sense that she understood in a way that most people would not. There was something in her eyes, some shadow of old pain that recognized his own. "Well," she said finally, taking his empty bowl, "you are welcome to stay here until your legs are healed enough to travel. It is the least we can do for someone who tried to help us, even if that help came at great cost to yourself." "I am grateful," Quinn said, "though I do not want to impose. You are not imposing. And truthfully, having another capable person here is a blessing. Robert is a good man, but he is not a frontiersman. He is still learning the country. Another set of hands, another gun if needed, that is valuable out here." The door to one of the other rooms opened and a man emerged, tall and lean with the look of someone who had been a clerk or shopkeeper back east. He had thinning sandy hair and kind eyes, and he looked at Quinn with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "You are awake," he said, coming forward with an outstretched hand. "Robert Patterson. I cannot thank you enough for what you tried to do, coming to help when you heard Marianne scream. Olivia told me about the rattlesnake den. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I have ever heard of." Quinn shook his hand, noting the softness of the palm, the lack of calluses that spoke of a life not spent in hard labor. Quinn Caldwell, and it was probably more foolish than brave, in hindsight. "Perhaps," Robert said with a small smile, "but foolish bravery is still bravery. You are welcome here as long as you need to stay." Over the next few days, Quinn's strength returned gradually. The snake venom had done serious damage, but Olivia's quick treatment had saved his life, and his naturally robust constitution did the rest. She changed his bandages twice daily, her hands gentle but impersonal, treating him with the same efficiency she seemed to bring to all her tasks. He learned more about her during those days of recovery. She was 23 years old, had grown up in Ohio where her father had been a doctor, teaching both his daughters basic medicine and surgery before fever took, and his wife within days of each other the previous winter. Marianne, older by 2 years and already married, had convinced Olivia to join her and Robert in Wyoming rather than staying alone in Ohio with nothing but memories and an empty house. "I did not want to come at first," Olivia admitted one afternoon as she worked on his legs, her capable hands unwrapping old bandages and examining the healing wounds with a critical eye. I thought Marianne was mad, following Robert to the edge of nowhere, but after our parents died, the silence in that house was suffocating. At least here the silence is clean. Quinn understood that distinction perfectly. The wilderness does not judge, he said, does not ask questions about who you were or what you have done, it simply is. She looked up at him, her amber eyes meeting his, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Yes, she said softly, exactly that. The wounds were healing well, she told him, showing none of the signs of infection that would have been deadly this far from proper medical care. His feet, torn by rocks and fangs alike, were the worst of it, but even those were closing, the angry red of fresh injuries fading to pink. You heal fast, she observed, like an animal. Clean living and mountain air, he said with a slight smile, or pure stubbornness. But there was warmth in her voice, almost affection. By the end of the first week, Quinn was able to stand, though walking was still painful and difficult. He insisted on helping around the cabin despite Olivia's protests, chopping wood one-handed while leaning against the chopping block for support, helping Robert with repairs to the chicken coop that had needed doing for weeks, making himself useful in whatever small ways he could manage. He met Marianne properly on the 5th day, when she finally emerged from her room looking pale but happy, baby Ezra cradled in her arms. She had the same auburn hair as her sister but softer features, rounder and more conventionally pretty, with an air of gentleness that Olivia seemed to lack. "Thank you," she said simply when Olivia introduced them. "Olivia told me what you did. That was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid." Quinn laughed, wincing at the pull on his healing muscles. "So I have been told. But I am glad you and your boy are well." "Would you like to hold him?" Marianne asked, and before Quinn could protest, she was transferring the small warm bundle into his massive arms. Ezra was tiny against his chest, impossibly fragile, with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right through Quinn to something beyond. The baby made a small sound, not quite a cry, and instinctively Quinn adjusted his hold, supporting the small head with one scarred hand. "You are a natural," Marianne said with approval. Quinn felt something crack open in his chest, some long frozen place thawing painfully. "I had a son once," he heard himself say, the words escaping before he could stop them. "He would have been about 10 now. He and his mother died of cholera while I was at war." The silence that followed was heavy with sympathy, but it was not pitying, and he was grateful for that. Marianne touched his arm gently and took Ezra back, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I am so sorry," she whispered. Olivia said nothing, but when Quinn glanced at her, he saw understanding in her face, and that was somehow more comforting than any words could have been. That night, after Robert and Marianne had retired to their room with the baby, Quinn sat by the fire with Olivia, neither of them speaking, simply sharing the silence and the warmth of the flames. Finally, she broke the quiet, her voice soft in the darkness. "My father delivered over 100 babies in his career as a doctor," she said. "Never lost a mother or child to anything but circumstance beyond his control. He taught me everything he knew, said I had the hands and the heart for healing, but when he and mother took sick, all my knowledge meant nothing. I could not save them." "Some things cannot be saved," Quinn said quietly, "no matter how much we know or how hard we try. That does not make the trying worthless." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he felt the weight of her gaze like a physical thing. "You are a wise man, Quinn Caldwell, for someone who chooses to live alone in the wilderness." "Not wise," he said, "just old enough to have made most of the mistakes there are to make." "You are not that old. What are you, 30? 32, he admitted. "Ancient," she smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face. "Practically decrepit. I am surprised you made it through the snake den without your bones turning to dust." He laughed, surprised by the sound, realizing it had been years since he had laughed with genuine amusement. "I am tougher than I look." "You look like you could wrestle a bear and win," Olivia said, her eyes traveling over his broad shoulders and muscled arms. "So if you are tougher than that, you must be practically indestructible." "Not indestructible," Quinn said, sobering slightly. "Just hard to kill. There is a difference." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Quinn could not quite name. Then Olivia rose from her chair, moving to the window to look out at the darkness beyond. It is a hard country for women alone, she said quietly. Marianne has Robert and now Ezra. But I am just the spinster sister, the extra mouth to feed. I try to make myself useful, to earn my keep, but sometimes I wonder what I am doing here, what purpose I serve. Quinn stood, moving to join her at the window despite the protest of his healing legs. You saved my life, he said. That seems like a pretty clear purpose to me. She turned to face him, and in the dim light her eyes were luminous. You saved yourself by being strong enough to survive. I just helped. No, Quinn said firmly. You did more than help. You fought for me when I could not fight for myself. That matters. They stood close, closer than was probably proper, and Quinn was acutely aware of her presence, of the warmth of her body and the scent of herbs and wood smoke that clung to her hair. He had not been this close to a woman in years, had not wanted to be, but something about Olivia called to him in a way he had thought long dead. Quinn, she said softly, and the sound of his name in her voice sent a shiver through him that had nothing to do with snake venom or fever. He stepped back, breaking the moment, suddenly aware of boundaries and propriety, and all the things that should matter to a civilized person. I should rest, he said, his voice rougher than intended. My legs are still healing. Disappointment flickered across her face, there and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. Of course, she said, her tone once again brisk and professional. You need your strength. Quinn returned to the bed and settled himself under the blankets, but sleep was long in coming. He lay awake listening to the sounds of the cabin settling, of Olivia moving about quietly preparing for her own rest, and wondered what he was doing, what he was feeling, what any of this meant. He had come to the mountains to escape exactly this kind of complication, this kind of connection. He had buried his heart with his wife and son and sworn never to be vulnerable like that again. The wilderness did not demand emotional investment. It did not require pieces of his soul that he no longer had to give. But Olivia Zimmerman, with her amber eyes and capable hands and whiskey smoke voice, was making him reconsider choices he had thought set in stone. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Quinn woke to find Olivia already up and moving about the cabin with her usual efficient grace. She had coffee ready, real coffee, a luxury out here, and the smell of it was almost enough to distract him from the complicated feelings of the night before. Good morning, she said, handing him a tin cup filled with the steaming liquid. How are your legs? Better, he said truthfully. I think I might try walking a bit more today, building up strength. Do not push too hard, she cautioned. You are healing well, but you are not healed yet. They fell into an easy routine over the following days. Quinn would help with what tasks he could manage, gradually extending his range as his strength returned. He taught Robert how to track game properly, how to read signs in the earth and vegetation that spoke of animal movement and water sources. He repaired tools and equipment with the practical skill of someone who had spent years making do with limited resources. And he talked with Olivia. They would sit together in the evenings after the others had retired, sharing stories of their pasts, their losses, their hopes. She told him about growing up in Ohio, about watching her father work, and learning to see the human body as a puzzle to be solved, a machine that could be repaired if you just understood how the pieces fit together. She told him about the loneliness of being an educated woman in a place and time that did not quite know what to do with such a thing, about feeling like she existed between worlds, belonging fully to none. He told her about the war, about things he had never spoken aloud to another living soul, about the mud and blood and screaming, about watching boys who should have been thinking about sweethearts and harvest dances torn apart by artillery and disease, about coming home to find his small house empty, his wife and son buried in a pauper's grave because there had been no one to pay for better, his entire world reduced to 2 wooden crosses and a pile of earth. I wanted to die too, he admitted one night, the words raw and honest in the firelit darkness. For months after, I wished I had died in the war, that some Confederate bullet had found me instead of the man standing next to me. But dying turned out to be harder than living, so I lived. I went west, went to the mountains, and I tried to become something other than human, something that did not feel or want or need. Did it work? Olivia asked softly. Quinn looked at her, at the compassion and understanding in her face, and shook his head. I thought it did. For 8 years I thought I had succeeded in turning myself into stone. Then I heard you scream, and I ran through a den of rattlesnakes without even thinking about it. And I realized I was still human after all, still capable of responding to someone else's need. I am glad, Olivia said. The world has enough stone in it already. It needs more men like you, men who run toward danger to help others. Even when it is stupid? Quinn asked with a slight smile. Especially when it is stupid, she said, returning his smile with one of her own. Calculated bravery is just good sense. Stupid bravery is something rarer, something more valuable. 3 weeks after Quinn's dramatic arrival, his legs had healed enough for him to walk without pain, and he knew the time had come to make a decision. He could return to his mountain camp, to the solitary life he had built for himself, or he could stay, could see where this unexpected connection might lead. The choice should have been simple. He had spent 8 years building walls around his heart, 8 years convincing himself that he was better off alone, that attachment only led to pain and loss. But every time he thought about leaving, about walking away from Olivia and her amber eyes and sharp intelligence and unexpected laughter, something in his chest twisted painfully. He was standing outside the cabin, ostensibly checking on the horses in the small corral Robert had built, when Olivia found him. She came to stand beside him at the fence, her shoulder almost but not quite touching his, her presence warm and solid and real. "Your legs are healed," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Quinn confirmed. "Well enough to travel anyway, so you will be leaving soon." Again, not a question, just a statement of fact, but there was something beneath the words, something that might have been regret. Quinn turned to face her fully, taking in the sight of her in the afternoon sun, her auburn hair gleaming with copper highlights, her face tilted up to meet his gaze with characteristic directness. She was beautiful, he realized, not in the soft, conventional way of Marianne, but in a fiercer, more elemental fashion. She was beautiful the way a mountain was beautiful, the way a storm was beautiful, with power and presence and an edge of danger. "I should go," he said carefully. "I have a camp up in the high country. Supplies cached there. It will be a hard winter if I do not start preparing now." "But," Olivia prompted, hearing what he had not said. "But I do not want to," Quinn admitted, the words feeling like they were being torn from some deep place inside him. "I came down from that mountain because I heard you scream, and part of me wishes I could go back to who I was before that moment, to the simplicity of living alone. But I cannot. You have reminded me of what it feels like to be human, to connect with another person, and now that I remember, I do not know how to forget again." Olivia was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "I have been thinking," she said finally, "about purpose and place and what I am supposed to do with my life. I came here because Marianne needed me, because I had nowhere else to go. But she does not really need me anymore. She has Robert and Ezra, and while she loves me, I am in the way now, an extra person in a small cabin meant for a family." "You are not in the way," Quinn protested. "Robert told me how grateful they are to have you here. They are grateful because they are good people," Olivia said. "But that does not change the fact that I am living their life, not my own. I have been thinking about what my own life might look like, what I might want if I could have anything." "And what do you want?" Quinn asked, his heart beating faster. She looked up at him with those remarkable eyes, and he saw fear there, and hope, and a courage that matched his own. "I want to not be alone anymore," she said quietly. "I want to wake up each day knowing there is someone who sees me, truly sees me, not just as a useful extra pair of hands or a spinster sister. I want to matter to someone, to be chosen, not just tolerated." Quinn reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in one large, scarred hand. She leaned into the touch, her eyes drifting closed for a moment, and when they opened again they were bright with unshed tears. "You matter," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "To me you matter. These past weeks with you have been the first time in 8 years that I have felt alive, truly alive, not just existing. You have given me something I thought I had lost forever." "What is that?" she whispered. "Hope," Quinn said simply. "Hope that there might be a future worth living, worth building. Hope that I might be more than just a ghost haunting the mountains." Olivia reached up and covered his hand with her own, holding it against her cheek. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am afraid of wanting something and losing it, like I lost my parents, like you lost your wife and son. I am afraid of being hurt." "So am I," Quinn said, terrified if I am honest. but I am more afraid of walking away from this, from you, and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been." "What are you saying?" Olivia asked, though he could see in her eyes that she knew, that she understood. "I am saying stay with me," Quinn said. "Come up to the mountains with me. Let me build you a proper cabin, a home, a life. Let me wake up every day knowing that you chose to be there, chose to be with me. Let me have the honor of mattering to you the way you matter to me." Tears spilled over now, tracking down her cheeks to wet his hand where it still cupped her face. "Yes," she said, the word somewhere between a sob and a laugh. "Yes, Quinn Caldwell, I will stay with you. I will go anywhere with you." He kissed her then, unable to hold back any longer, and it was like coming home after a long exile, like finding water after days in the desert. Her lips were soft under his, tasting of salt and coffee and promise, and when she kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck, he felt something broken inside him begin to heal. They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the afternoon sun, and when they finally broke apart they were both smiling, both transformed by the simple act of choosing each other, of taking a chance on hope and future and love. "I should talk to Marianne and Robert," Olivia said, though she made no move to pull away from Quinn's embrace. "They deserve to know." "They probably already know," Quinn said with a soft laugh. "We have not exactly been subtle these past weeks." Olivia laughed too, the sound bright and joyful. "No, I suppose we have not. Robert teased me just yesterday about the way I look at you. I denied it, of course, but not very convincingly." That evening, they told Marianne and Robert together, sitting at the table after supper while Ezra slept in his cradle nearby. To no one's surprise, Marianne cried happy tears, and Robert shook Quinn's hand with genuine warmth. "I worried about her," Marianne admitted, wiping her eyes. "Out here, with so few people, I thought she might end up alone her whole life. But you are a good man, Quinn Caldwell. Anyone can see that. You will take care of her." "We will take care of each other," Quinn corrected gently, glancing at Olivia. "She saved my life, after all. I think that makes us even." "We should have a proper wedding," Robert said. "Small, just us, but proper. Olivia deserves that much." Quinn looked to Olivia, ready to agree to whatever she wanted, but she shook her head. "I do not need a ceremony," she said. "My parents are gone, and there is no one else whose blessing I need. If Quinn wants to marry me in the eyes of God and law, we can find a preacher when we are next near a town. But in my heart, I am already his, and he is mine. That is enough for me. Are you sure?" Marianne asked, looking troubled. "Mama would have wanted you to have a proper wedding, with a dress and flowers and all the traditional things." "Mama would have wanted me to be happy," Olivia said firmly. "And Quinn makes me happy. The rest is just trappings." They talked long into the night, making plans. Quinn would return to his mountain camp to retrieve his supplies and break down his temporary shelters, a trip that would take perhaps a week. While he was gone, Olivia would prepare for the journey, sorting through her possessions and deciding what to bring to her new life. When Quinn returned, they would head north together into the higher mountains, to a place he knew where there was good water and shelter from the worst storms, and there they would build a permanent home. "You will come visit," Olivia insisted to her sister. "Once the cabin is built and we are settled, you and Robert and Ezra will come stay with us." "It will be difficult with the baby," Marianne said doubtfully. "All the more reason to have somewhere else to go when you need a change of scenery," Olivia countered. "Besides, Ezra should know his aunt and uncle." The next morning, Quinn prepared to leave for his mountain camp. He stood in the yard checking his gear, most of which Olivia had carefully saved and repaired during his recovery, when she emerged from the cabin with a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "Food for the journey," she said, handing it to him. "And some of the salve I made for your legs, in case they give you trouble on the trail." "Thank you," Quinn said, securing the bundle to his pack. He straightened and looked at her, memorizing the sight of her in the morning light, wanting to carry the image with him during their brief separation. "I will be back in a week, maybe less if the weather holds. I will be ready," Olivia promised. She stepped close and rose on her toes to kiss him, a brief sweet contact that nevertheless made his heart race. "Be safe, Quinn Caldwell. You have someone waiting for you now." "I will be safe," he promised, "and I will hurry back to you." He left then, forcing himself to walk away. to put distance between himself and the woman who had somehow become the center of his world in just a few short weeks. But even as he climbed into the high country, following familiar trails toward his camp, he was already planning the return journey, already imagining Olivia beside him as they made their way to their new home. The week passed in a blur of activity. Quinn reached his camp without incident, his legs holding up well to the strain of mountain travel. He spent 2 days packing and organizing, breaking down the lean-to-shelter he had been living in and bundling his supplies for transport. He had more than he remembered. Gear and tools and preserved food accumulated over 8 years of solitary living, and he had to cache some of it to retrieve later. On the 3rd day, he began scouting the area he had in mind for their new home, a high valley sheltered by pine and aspen, with a cold stream running through it and good grazing for the horses he planned to acquire. The site was perfect, remote enough for privacy but not so isolated as to be dangerous, with timber for building and game for hunting. He spent the 4th and 5th days cutting trees and beginning the foundation work for a cabin, wanting to have something tangible to show Olivia when they returned, proof that he was serious about building a life with her. The physical labor felt good, felt purposeful in a way his existence had not for years, and he worked from dawn until dark, driving himself with an energy born of hope and anticipation. On the 6th day, he made the return journey to the Patterson cabin, his pack heavy with essential gear, his mind full of plans for the future. He made good time, pushing hard, eager to see Olivia again, to feel her hand in his and know that their brief separation was over. He arrived at the cabin in the late afternoon, and Olivia must have been watching for him because she emerged from the door before he could even call out a greeting. She ran to him, actually ran, and he dropped his pack and caught her up in his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with pure joy. "You came back," she said when he set her down, though there was no real doubt in her voice, only happiness. "Always," Quinn promised. "I will always come back to you." They left 2 days later, after Olivia had said her goodbyes to Mary Ann and Robert and little Ezra, after promises had been extracted about visits and letters sent to the nearest trading post. Mary Ann cried, but they were mostly happy tears, and Robert shook Quinn's hand with the grip of a friend. "Take care of her," he said quietly, "man to man, with my life," Quinn promised, and meant it, absolutely. The journey to the high valley took 4 days, traveling slowly to accommodate Olivia's smaller horse and the pack animals, carrying her possessions and Quinn's supplies. They camped each night under the stars, and Quinn taught Olivia the skills of wilderness living, though she proved to be a quick study with good instincts. They talked during the long hours of travel, learning more about each other, building the foundation of trust and understanding that would support their life together. Olivia told him about her dreams, about wanting to use her medical knowledge to help people, perhaps establishing herself as a frontier healer once they were settled. Quinn told her about his plans for the cabin, for building up a small homestead that could support them through the harsh mountain winters. "I want children," Olivia said on the 3rd night, her voice soft in the darkness of their camp. "I know it is early to speak of such things, but I want you to know. I want a family." Quinn was silent for a moment, working through the complicated tangle of feelings that admission provoked. "I want that too," he said finally. "I am afraid of it, afraid of losing them the way I lost before, but I want it. I want a life with you, Olivia, a full life, with all the risks and joys that entails." "We will protect them," Olivia said fiercely. "Between your strength and my medical knowledge, we will give them every chance to grow up strong and healthy." "Yes," Quinn agreed, pulling her close against his side. "We will." They reached the valley on the afternoon of the 4th day, and Olivia's reaction to seeing it for the first time made all of Quinn's hard work worthwhile. She dismounted and simply stood, taking in the beauty of the place, the way the light filtered through the aspens and made the streams sparkle like diamonds, the vast sweep of sky overhead and the protective embrace of the surrounding peaks. "It is perfect," she breathed. "Quinn, it is absolutely perfect." He showed her the foundation work he had started, the way he envisioned the cabin sitting on a slight rise with windows facing south to catch the winter sun and a porch where they could sit in the evenings. She added her own ideas, talking about a kitchen garden and a root cellar, about space for drying herbs and storing medical supplies. They spent the next weeks in a frenzy of construction, working from dawn to dusk to get the cabin built before winter arrived. Quinn did the heavy work of hauling and placing logs, but Olivia proved surprisingly capable with an axe and saw, and she had a good eye for fit and finish. They worked in comfortable partnership, anticipating each other's needs, moving around each other with an unconscious grace that spoke of growing connection. At night they slept in a tent Quinn had brought from his camp, lying close together for warmth as the temperatures began to drop. They had not yet consummated their relationship, both wanting the privacy and permanence of the finished cabin for that step, but they grew increasingly comfortable with each other's bodies, with casual touches and stolen kisses and the simple intimacy of shared space. The cabin took shape log by log, board by board. It was not large, just one main room with a loft accessible by ladder, but it was solid and well built, designed to withstand the brutal mountain winters. Quinn chinked the gaps between logs with mud and moss, and Olivia used precious cloth to make curtains for the windows he had laboriously fitted with glass salvaged from an abandoned mining camp a day's ride away. 6 weeks after their arrival in the valley, the cabin was finished. They stood back and looked at their work, and Quinn felt a fierce pride swelling in his chest. This was his home, their home, built with his own hands and filled with love and purpose. "We should christen it properly," Olivia said, a blush rising in her cheeks, even as she met his eyes with characteristic directness. Quinn's mouth went dry. "Are you sure?" he asked. "We are not married in any legal sense yet." "I told you before," Olivia said, stepping close and placing her hand over his heart. "I am already yours, and you are mine. I do not need a piece of paper or a preacher's blessing to know that, do you?" "No," Quinn admitted. "I know you are mine, Olivia Zimmerman. I knew it the moment you opened that door and your eyes met mine, even though I was too stubborn and scared to admit it then." She took his hand and led him into the cabin, into the space they had created together, and in the soft light filtering through the curtains, she began to undress. Quinn watched, mesmerized, as she revealed herself to him, her body lean and strong, marked with small scars from a lifetime of work and learning, beautiful in its functionality and purpose. Then she helped him with his own clothes, her hands gentle on his scarred body, touching the marks of snake fangs and old battles with tenderness rather than revulsion. When they were both bare, they simply held each other for a long moment, skin to skin, hearts beating in synchrony. Their lovemaking was sweet and slow, an exploration and a claiming all at once. Quinn was careful with her, mindful of his greater size and strength, but Olivia met him with equal passion, her body rising to meet his, her hands gripping his shoulders, her voice crying out his name as pleasure built and crested and washed through them both. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed Quinn had built, their bodies cooling in the mountain air, and Quinn felt a completeness he had thought forever lost to him. This was what he had been searching for without knowing it, what had driven him to the mountains and kept him there, waiting, not escape, but this, connection, belonging, love. "I love you," he said, the words feeling both strange and utterly natural. "I love you, Olivia. I love you too," she whispered, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "I love you, Quinn Caldwell, my brave, foolish mountain man who ran through a rattlesnake den to reach me." They spent the fall and early winter building their life together, establishing routines and patterns that would sustain them through the long, isolated months ahead. Quinn hunted and trapped, bringing in meat and furs that would be valuable for trade. Olivia tended the small garden she had planted, preserving what vegetables she could harvest before the frost, and she gathered and dried herbs with an eye toward both medicine and seasoning. They made love frequently, learning each other's bodies and preferences, building a physical intimacy that matched and deepened their emotional connection. Olivia proved to be passionate and uninhibited once her initial shyness wore off, and Quinn discovered that giving her pleasure was as satisfying as finding his own. By the time the first heavy snows arrived in November, they were well prepared, the cabin stocked with food and fuel, the horses sheltered in a sturdy lean-to Quinn had built against one wall. They settled into winter routines, spending long evenings by the fire reading aloud to each other from the few books Olivia had brought, talking about everything and nothing, simply enjoying each other's presence. It was during one of these quiet evenings, with snow falling thick outside and the fire crackling cheerfully, that Olivia placed Quinn's hand on her stomach and told him she was pregnant. For a moment he could not breathe, could not think, overwhelmed by the rush of emotions, joy and terror in equal measure, hope and fear warring in his chest. Then he looked up and saw the same complex mixture reflected in Olivia's face, and he understood that they were in this together, that whatever came they would face it side by side. "Are you happy?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain in a way it rarely was. "Terrified," Quinn admitted, "and happier than I have been in my entire life, both at once." "Me too," Olivia said, relief evident in her expression. "I am scared, Quinn. I know all the things that can go wrong, all the ways I could lose this baby or lose myself, but I want this. I want our child. We will keep you both safe," Quinn promised, pulling her into his arms. "Whatever it takes, I will keep you both safe." The pregnancy progressed through the winter months, and Quinn watched in awe as Olivia's body changed, as the life they had created together grew inside her. She remained active and capable despite her condition, insisting on maintaining her share of the work, though Quinn found himself increasingly protective, taking over tasks he deemed too strenuous or risky. They argued about it sometimes, Olivia's independent nature chafing at what she saw as overprotectiveness, but they always made up, always came back to the fundamental understanding that they were partners, equals, each bringing different strengths to their life together. Spring came late to the high mountains, but when it finally arrived, it brought an explosion of life and color. The snow melted to reveal new growth, and Olivia's pregnancy entered its final stages. She was enormous now, her belly swollen with the child that seemed determined to be as large as its father, and Quinn could see the strain it put on her smaller frame. "I am going to go get Marianne," he announced one morning in late May, when Olivia was struggling to rise from bed. "I know you said you could deliver the baby yourself, but I want your sister here. I want someone who has been through this, someone you trust." Olivia looked ready to argue, but then she winced as the baby kicked vigorously, and nodded instead. "All right," she agreed, "but hurry, this child feels ready to arrive any day now." Quinn rode hard, making the journey to the Patterson cabin in just 2 days, and found Marianne willing and eager to come. Robert agreed to manage on his own with young Ezra for a few weeks, and the two of them made the return journey as quickly as they dared, arriving back at the High Valley just as Olivia's labor began in earnest. The birth was long and difficult, Olivia's smaller frame struggling with the size of the baby, and there were hours when Quinn thought he would go mad with the sounds of her pain and his own helplessness. But Marianne was calm and capable, coaching her sister through each contraction, and finally, just after dawn on a beautiful June morning, their son was born. He was large and red and squalling, with a thick shock of dark hair and his father's strong features. And when Marianne placed him in Quinn's arms for the first time, Quinn wept openly, all the grief and fear and love of the past year pouring out in tears of overwhelming emotion. "He is perfect," he said, his voice breaking. "Olivia, he is perfect." "Of course he is," Olivia said weakly from the bed, exhausted but smiling. "We made him. How could he be anything but perfect?" They named him Thomas, after Quinn's father, with Caldwell as his surname, because even though they had still not found a preacher to marry them, formally Olivia insisted she was a Caldwell in every way that mattered. Marianne stayed for 2 weeks, helping with the baby and ensuring Olivia recovered properly from the birth. When she finally returned to her own family, extracting promises of visits and future gatherings, Quinn and Olivia were left alone with their son, learning the rhythms and demands of new parenthood. It was exhausting and overwhelming and absolutely wonderful. Thomas was a healthy baby, strong and hungry, and he grew rapidly under Olivia's careful nursing. Quinn found himself enchanted by every small development, every new expression or sound, and he spent hours simply watching his son sleep, marveling at the tiny miracle of his existence. The summer passed in a blur of activity, caring for Tassis and maintaining their homestead and simply being a family. Quinn had never been happier, had never felt more complete, and he told Olivia so frequently, needing her to know how much she and their son meant to him. In late August, a traveling preacher came through the area, an old circuit rider who made the rounds of isolated homesteads and mining camps, bringing the word of God to the frontier. Quinn and Olivia asked him to marry them formally, standing in front of their cabin with Thomas cradled in Olivia's arms, speaking vows that were more confirmation than promise, since they had been living as husband and wife for nearly a year. But it felt right to make it official, to have their union blessed and recognized. And when the preacher pronounced them man and wife and Quinn kissed Olivia with their son squirming between them, he felt a sense of profound rightness, of being exactly where he was meant to be. The years that followed were good ones, full of hard work and simple joys. They expanded the cabin, adding a second room as their family grew. A daughter arrived 2 years after Thomas, a tiny fierce thing they named Sarah, who had her mother's auburn hair and her father's stubborn determination. 2 more sons followed at intervals, Daniel and James, each healthy and strong, each adding their own personality to the family dynamic. Quinn proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful despite his sometimes gruff exterior, and the children adored him, following him around the homestead like ducklings trailing their mother. He taught them wilderness skills as they grew, how to track and hunt and read the land, passing on the knowledge that had kept him alive through his years of solitude. Olivia established herself as a healer in the region, riding out to help with difficult births or serious injuries, her medical knowledge and calm competence earning respect and gratitude from the scattered community of settlers and miners. She taught their children to read and write and do figures, determined that they would have the education she and Marianne had been privileged to receive. They made the journey to visit Marianne and Robert every summer, the trip becoming an annual tradition that all the children looked forward to. Ezra grew up alongside his cousins, and the bond between the two families remained strong, despite the distance that separated them most of the year. Quinn never returned to his solitary mountain existence. The man who had spent 8 years alone, convinced he was better off without human connection, had been transformed by love into someone who could not imagine life without his family. The ghosts that had haunted him faded, not forgotten but integrated, becoming part of his history rather than his present. On quiet evenings, after the children were in bed, he and Olivia would sit on the porch they had built that first summer, looking out over the valley that had become their home, and talk about their life, about how strangely things had turned out. "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked one such evening when they were in their late 40s and their children were mostly grown. "Running through that rattlesnake den? You nearly died." Quinn considered the question seriously, as he always did when Olivia asked something important. "No," he said finally, "not for a moment. That was the day my life truly began, the day I started living instead of just existing. Everything good I have, everything that matters, came from that moment when I heard you scream and my feet started moving before my mind could talk me out of it." "Stupid bravery," Olivia said with a smile, echoing her words from so many years ago. "The best kind," Quinn agreed, taking her hand in his, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "The only kind that matters." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set behind the mountains, and Quinn reflected on the strange paths that had brought them to this moment. A war that had destroyed his first life, driving him into the wilderness. 8 years of isolation and slow healing. A desperate run through a den of rattlesnakes toward a scream that had pierced his carefully constructed solitude. And Olivia, opening the door because she had heard him coming, choosing to save him, to see him, to love him. Thomas, their eldest, returned to the valley that fall with a wife of his own, a smart, capable woman named Catherine, who fit into the family like she had always been there. They built a small cabin on the far side of the valley, close enough for connection but far enough for privacy, and announced the following spring that they were expecting a baby. Quinn held his first grandchild, a boy named Joseph, and felt the circle of life turn. He was a grandfather now, getting older, his dark hair liberally streaked with silver, his body bearing the marks of a life lived hard and full, but he was happy, surrounded by family, by love, by the legacy he and Olivia had built together. Sarah married a few years later, a young blacksmith named Peter, who set up his forge in the nearest town, and she divided her time between helping her mother with healing work and supporting her husband's business. Daniel and James remained at home longer, helping Quinn with the expanded homestead they had built, running cattle and horses in the mountain meadows. Olivia's hair turned silver white, and her hands developed the slight tremor of age, but her mind remained sharp and her spirit undimmed. She delivered her own grandchildren, and then great-grandchildren, passing on her medical knowledge to Sarah and to Catherine, ensuring the skills her father had taught her would continue into future generations. They grew old together, Quinn and Olivia, their love deepening and mellowing like good whiskey in a barrel. They had their disagreements, their moments of frustration and anger, but they never lost sight of the fundamental truth that bound them together. They had chosen each other, and that choice had transformed both their lives. On their 30th wedding anniversary, celebrated with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the homestead, Quinn stood and offered a toast. "To my wife," he said, his voice still strong despite his 62 years, "who heard me coming through a rattlesnake den and opened the door instead of barring it, who saw a poisoned, bleeding mountain man and chose to save him, who gave me a reason to live when I had nearly forgotten what that felt like. Everything I am, everything we have built here, exists because of your courage and your love." Olivia stood and came to stand beside him, her hand finding his with the surety of long practice. "To my husband," she said, her voice carrying the same whiskey smoke quality it had always had, "who ran through danger without hesitation because someone needed help, who taught me that love is not about avoiding pain, but about choosing to be vulnerable anyway, who gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined when I was the spinster sister in a borrowed cabin. You are my home, Quinn Caldwell, and you always will be." They kissed while their family applauded and cheered, and when they finally broke apart, both smiling, Quinn looked around at the life they had created and felt profound gratitude. The rattlesnake bites had healed long ago, leaving only faint scars on his legs, but the memory of that desperate run remained vivid. He had been running toward death that day, though he had not known it. But Olivia had been standing on the other side of that death, waiting with capable hands and fierce determination, ready to pull him back into life and love and purpose. He would run through 1,000 rattlesnake dens for her, would face any danger, endure any pain, because she had given him something precious beyond measure, a reason to live, a family to protect, a love that had sustained him through 3 decades and would carry him through whatever time remained. As the evening wore on and their family celebrated around them, Quinn and Olivia slipped away to their porch, to their customary seats, to watch the sun set over the valley that had been their home and sanctuary for so long. "Happy?" Olivia asked, the question she had asked countless times over the years. "Always," Quinn replied, the answer he always gave because it was always true. "With you, always." The sun dropped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, and they sat together in the gathering darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a love that would echo through generations. The rattlesnakes were long gone from the canyon where Quinn had run all those years ago. The den disbanded or relocated, but the story of that desperate run remained, told and retold to children and grandchildren as a testament to the power of instinctive courage, of responding to need without calculation or thought of personal cost. It became family legend, the tale of how grandfather Quinn had run barefoot through a den of rattlesnakes to reach grandmother Olivia, how she had heard him coming and opened the door, how that moment of connection had transformed them both and created everything that followed. And in the years to come, when Quinn and Olivia had both passed on, their children and grandchildren would gather in the valley they had claimed, tamed, in the house they had built with their own hands and filled it with love, and they would tell the story again, keeping the memory alive, honoring the courage and love that had founded their family. But on this evening, the 30th anniversary of a wedding that had merely formalized a bond already forged in adversity and choice, Quinn and Olivia sat together on their porch and watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky, content in the knowledge that they had lived well, loved deeply, and created something that would outlast them both. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Quinn asked quietly. "That first day when I woke up after the snake bites?" "I said a lot of things," Olivia replied. "Which particular words do you mean?" "You said I did not get to die in your cabin, that I had not run through a rattlesnake den just to give up." "I remember," Olivia said softly. I was angry at you for being so reckless and terrified that you would die anyway despite my best efforts. You saved me that day, Quinn said, and every day since. You gave me a reason to keep fighting, to keep living, to be more than just a ghost in the mountains. We saved each other, Olivia corrected, leaning her head on his shoulder. I was just as lost as you were, just in a different way. You gave me purpose, gave me a place to belong, gave me a love I had thought I would never find. They fell silent, listening to the night sounds of the valley, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of wind in the aspens, the soft murmur of voices from inside the house where their family was still celebrating. I would do it all again, Quinn said finally. Every moment, every choice, every hardship. I would run through that den 1,000 times to end up here, now, with you. And I would open that door every time, Olivia replied. I would choose you every time, my brave, foolish mountain man. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human drama, but bearing witness nonetheless to the small miracle of two people finding each other in the vastness of the frontier, two wounded souls healing together, two lives intertwining to create something greater than either could have achieved alone. Years later, when Quinn finally passed at the age of 71, surrounded by his family in the bed he had built with his own hands, his last words were of Olivia, his last coherent thought, a memory of running through danger to reach her, of the door opening to reveal amber eyes and a future he had not dared to imagine. And when Olivia followed him 2 years later, her children gathered around her, she smiled at the end and whispered that she could hear him coming, that she was ready to open the door once more and let him in. They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking the valley, under aspens that turned gold each fall and whispered secrets in the wind. Their graves were marked with simple stones that their children had carved, inscribed with their names and the years of their lives, and below that a simple phrase that captured the essence of their story. He ran through danger to reach her. She opened the door and let him in. The valley they had claimed remained in the family for generations. The cabin expanded and modified, but never abandoned. The land worked and loved by their descendants who grew up hearing the stories, knowing the legacy, understanding that they existed because a mountain man had once made a foolish, brave choice to run barefoot through a rattlesnake den toward a scream, and a woman had chosen to save him, to see him, to love him. The rattlesnakes never returned to that particular canyon, or if they did, no one ran through them again. But the memory of Quinn's desperate run lived on, a testament to the transformative power of choosing connection over safety, of responding to need without calculation, of opening doors instead of barring them against the unknown. And somewhere in the eternal mystery that lies beyond mortal understanding, two souls reunited, no longer separated by the barrier of death, free to walk together through endless valleys under infinite skies, still choosing each other, still opening doors, still running toward each other with the same desperate urgency that had brought them together on a summer day in Wyoming in 1873. Their love story became legend, passed down through the generations, embellished and simplified and mythologized, but at its core remaining true. A tale of courage and connection, of wounds healed and lives rebuilt, of two people who found each other against all odds and built something that lasted far beyond their mortal years. The cabin still stands, now over 150 years old, carefully maintained by descendants who understand its significance. Visitors come sometimes, distant relatives and local historians, people interested in frontier life and pioneer stories, and they stand in the place where Quinn and Olivia built their life and try to imagine what it must have been like. But the truth of it, the deep personal reality of two specific people falling in love and making a life together in wilderness that remains ineffable, beyond the reach of imagination or historical reconstruction. It belonged to them alone, Quinn and Olivia, the mountain man and the healer, the wounded soldier and the spinster sister, two imperfect people who found in each other exactly what they needed to become whole. The rattlesnakes are gone, the witness is dead, the world transformed beyond anything Quinn or Olivia could have recognized. But their story endures, carved in stone and written in blood and preserved in the memories of generations who came after, a reminder that love can emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, that bravery can be foolish and still noble, that sometimes the best thing we can do is run toward danger without thinking, trusting that on the other side someone will hear us coming and open the door. And in the end, is that not what love always is? A leap of faith, a dangerous crossing, a choice to be vulnerable despite every instinct toward self-preservation. Quinn ran through the rattlesnakes. Olivia opened the door, and in that moment of connection, two lives were transformed, two futures irrevocably altered, a family created that would span generations and touch countless lives. It was a good life they built together, full and rich and deeply lived. It was a love story for the ages, though they would have laughed at such grand language, preferring the simple truth of daily choice and sustained commitment. But whether mythologized or simply remembered, their story stands as testament to what becomes possible when we choose courage over caution, connection over isolation, love over fear. The sun sets over the Wyoming mountains now as it did then, painting the sky in impossible colors, and the aspens still whisper their secrets to anyone who will listen. The valley remains beautiful and harsh in equal measure, demanding everything from those who would make a life there, offering in return a freedom and wildness that cannot be found in gentler country. And somewhere in that wild country, in the bones of the earth and the memory of the wind, Quinn and Olivia's story lives on, eternal and unchanging, a reminder that the best things in life often come from the most desperate choices, that love is worth any risk, and that sometimes, when you hear someone coming through impossible danger to reach you, the bravest thing you can do is simply open the door.